Hey everybody, happy Thursday, welcome or welcome back. For those of you that are new, my name is Susan. I am a freelance fiction editor specializing in science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This week we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I had the honor and privilege of being able to present at GaryCon 2021 this year, and my presentation was on how to turn your RPG campaign into a novel. And this dives into a lot of different things on plot structure, on different ways that you need to present your story depending on whether you're doing it as a game orally or whether you're doing it on a page, as well as the technical aspects, the mechanics that need to change depending on if you're playing a game or if you're in a story. So I thought you guys might find that useful, so I have attached that presentation to this video, and so you can have a watch, and hope you enjoy. Alright, so we're here to talk today about how to turn your RPG campaign into a novel. I already told you a little bit about me, 10 years in publishing. I used to work at Orbit and Red Hook Books. For those of you that love books just as much as you love gaming, you probably recognize the brand of Orbit. They have a lot of authors that I'm sure you absolutely love. If you have not, I highly recommend their list. They're awesome. Granted, I'm biased, but it's still a good piece of advice. I am a freelance fiction editor now based in Chicago, actually just outside of it. That's my website if you want to find out anything more about me. And I put in here as a quick disclaimer, deck builders are actually my jam. So while I have played D&D, I do know RPGs to a limited extent. I know you guys are going to be way more knowledgeable than I am. So bear with me if you have any specific questions. We'll find a way to translate if it's something that I'm not familiar with. But I am much more likely to be found playing Pathfinder, the card game, or Ascension on my free time. All right, so let's dive in. So the first thing I want to talk about is IP versus original content. So the majority of you are coming to this already having probably years of experience working with either existing worlds or worlds that you've grown up loving and writing within. Now, if we're talking about turning your campaign into a novel, depending on what you want to do with that novel, you probably want it to be original content. You want it to be your own world, or you want to take the characters in the world that you built within someone else's and change it enough that you can own that content. Now, of course, that's entirely up to you, and obviously whatever brand or content IP that you wrote within, there's different rules for everybody and everything. So just a little bit of a disclaimer going forward, make sure you're checking in on that if you are wanting to move forward with this as far as publication or, you know, putting it out there with your name on it, anything like that. I want to make sure you guys are doing that in the right way so you can have fun, but also do it with respecting everybody's content and IP. Okay, so all of you are probably very familiar with a basic plot arc. Simplified stories go from normal to chaos to the new normal. Very, very familiar with this, how this works with movies, your campaigns, books, everything of that sort. But what a lot of people don't dive into is actually how that structure works. And in your RPG campaign, it has to be a wide world. You don't have any idea what your players are going to want to do, where they're going to go. They make very random choices. I've seen that a lot of times. We have a friend group that plays, and sometimes the choices they make absolutely no sense, and it is phenomenal to see what comes out of that. It's a bit more of a surprise than a book would be. A book has a very rigid structure of how it works, and so it may have more of a formula to it than you're used to. So I've put a couple of resources here if you're interested to learn more. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder is actually about screenwriting, but it's really interesting, and it shows you a lot of examples of how those story plot lines, those beats work. The one that I really like is The Hero's Two Journeys by Michael Haig and Chris Vogler. It's actually an audio recording of a presentation that they gave talking about plot structure and internal and external motivation. A lot of these are different. They have different ways of approaching plot. You need to find one that works and makes sense for you and for the story and characters and world that you're building. But for the sake of sort of giving you an idea of what I'm talking about, I'm going to run you through Michael Haig's version. That's the one that makes the most sense to me in my brain, and I really like it, and I think it applies across the board. As we walk through it, I think you're going to recognize a lot of this in the books and the worlds that you're familiar with. So I take absolutely no credit for this. This is plot structure according to Michael Haig, how it works, how he's seen this happen previously. So walking through this, giving you a quick overview of how this works. So the first 10% of your story, the first 10% of your novel should be the setup. You're introducing the hero in their life. You're showing them in their everyday before anything has changed, whether it's them going to work, whether it's them, getting ready to go to school. The example, and it's very funny. So I went sort of back and forth on what story I should use to give you an example of all of this. And I was trying to think about it because obviously we all love science fiction and fantasy. There are so many different examples I could choose from that. But they're not small books, and they're not simple in any way, shape, or form. They're complex with many plot lines. So in the end, I decided to go with one that hopefully most everybody is somewhat familiar with, and it's a middle grade book. It's Harry Potter, so you guys will be able to easily recognize the different hook steps, plot beats that I'm talking about. So for the first 10%, the setup, you see Harry at his home. You see, how the Dursleys are horrible to him. He lives in the cupboard. His life is just absolute. Am I allowed to swear in here? Does anybody know? All right, we're going to go with absolute crap. His life is absolute. It's horrible. So then the 10 to 25% is the new situation. So something has changed, and your main character or main characters are trying to adjust. And this can be positive or negative. So for example, for Harry, he starts to get the letters, and Hagrid comes to get him to take him to school. That's positive. He's taking him out of this horrible situation and, moving him to the school. He's excited about it. It can also be negative. Maybe if your story is about a dragon being taken down, then this part of this new situation would be that maybe the dragon comes to town, or the dragon killed the main character's family, or what have you. So, it's something that can be positive or negative. It just needs to be a change, a new situation that they're trying to adjust to. So then the 25% is the change of plans or the new desire. So it's a new situation that shows the main character what they want, they need. This is the main goal. So in the first 10 to 25%, you've probably been introduced to the main character's internal goal. So again, Harry, he wants to just fit in. He wants to be a part of a family. That's internal. He wants to feel like he belongs. The 25% change of plans, the new desire, is the external goal of your story arc. So you want to then establish if it's the dragon example, the main character will decide that he needs to kill the dragon or bring the dragon onto his side to defeat the evil, warlord, something of that sort. For Harry, they have the troll and the stuff from Gringotts that gets stolen, everything like that, which manifests as their external goal. They need to find out what's going on. They're going to start to investigate. Something odd is happening, so now they've made a change of plans. They have this new desire to sleuth out what's happening. 25 to 50% is then progress. So whatever that goal is, now they're going to make progress with it. So plans are made, plans are broken, good and bad things happen, conflict goes on. Things seem to be working okay. It's kind of one of those situations of 2 step forward, 1 step back type of a thing. You're making progress, so you're going to see this happening. So as far as my Harry Potter example, they're going to the library and they do research, and they're wandering around talking to Hagrid, figuring out about Fluffy, house points, things like that, where they're moving through that. Then you get to 50%, which is the point of no return. This is where something has to happen where they can't turn back. So whatever it is, this has made it where they can no longer go back to, the innocent boy that just showed up at school and wants to hang out with his friends. Or, the guy that's wanting to kill a dragon, maybe it's to the point where now the dragon has realized he's a threat and is coming after him. Sort of the same thing with the Harry Potter, where the 50%, the point of no return for Harry is when the Quidditch match, when he is attacked, when it is now that not only are they trying to solve this mystery, but it has something to do with him and he is in mortal danger. There is no going back from that. Harry is gonna die if they don't do something. So then the 50 to 75% is the higher stakes. It's more difficult and more important than ever that this goal is accomplished. We have to save Harry. We have to kill the dragon. We have to figure out how to solve this whatever political problem, whatever your main goal might be. 75%, major setback, all seems lost, plan didn't work. So this is for Harry, this is when they're in the woods, they run into trouble, they realize it's Voldemort, and they realize that Dumbledore is gone. They have no safety net. That is the absolute bottom for kids. They have no safety net. They have to do it on their own. They thought they'd just be able to run to Dumbledore and solve the problem, and that'd be it. That's not the case. A great example of this major setback, if you're not a fan of the Harry Potter genre, which is fine, is the Avengers movies. If you look at the Avengers movies as a whole versus as individual movies themselves, the major setback is when Thanos snaps his fingers and that movie ends, which if I'm ruining this for you, I apologize, but damn, you're behind the times. So the major setback there is obviously like half the population is gone. It's a bit of a setback, right? So all seems lost, plan didn't work, everything has gone to hell. So then the 75 to 90% of any story is the final countdown. So they need to achieve their goal or die trying. So this for Harry is going through all of the traps and the games trying to get to the Sorcerer's Stone. For the Avengers, it's obviously the last movie where they have sort of all but given up, and then, Ant-Man shows up and is like, we have to try this, I figured it out, sort of, and they have to go through all their trials and tribulations to try and get their family back. 90% climax. This is obviously conflicting, the conflict with the big bad. So whether it's a dragon, Voldemort, Thanos, what have you, this is your moment. This is where you're showing the culmination of everything you've been building toward. So then this must have a clear, if temporary, resolution. So this is something where you want to talk about whether or not you are going to do a standalone or a series. Most of you are probably going to be looking at doing a series. You're used to reading series. You're used to a campaign where you can do multiple different plots, multiple different goals, things like that. So you need to have a resolution, but it does not have to wrap everything up. And by that, I give the example again of Harry, where the climax is he defeats Quirrell, but Voldemort gets away. So it has wrapped up the mystery of book one, which was Quirrell with Voldemort in him, which is creepy, caused all these problems, did all this stuff, but he was defeated. The school is safe, but the storyline continues with Voldemort still out there. And then 90 to 100% is life is now as the new normal. So this is where you're seeing, okay, there's obviously ramifications for all of the horrible things you just put your characters through, but you're letting them settle. You're letting them see what life is now until you either wrap up everything or you lead into book two. So this, very quickly, I know I'm going through this very fast, and if you're interested, I will send you these slides so you don't have to frantically try to remember what I'm telling you, because I know I speak quickly. This is basic plot structure by Michael Haig. And this is really what you want to look at your storyline, your RPG campaign in the lens of, because the challenge with converting your RPG campaign is, again, your players, your characters, probably led you in all sorts of different places and adventures, side quests, things like that. You can't really do that in a book unless it's pointing towards either character development or plot. So following this, and again, there are different formulas, different plot structure theories other than Michael Haig. You do not need to follow this one. I highly recommend you read or go check out those resources I recommended because they're awesome. But this is sort of the more, this is one of the base rigid structures you'll want to take a look at when trying to confine your very unwieldy big world into one book or a series of books. Okay, so now we're going to dive into a little bit more of the smaller details, such as what you're going to need to change or adjust, and then we're going to dive a little bit into the mechanics as far as things that work in an RPG campaign that aren't going to work or that you'll need to figure out a different way to do in your novel. So pick your main characters. So for the game that you've been playing, depending on how many people you had playing with you, you probably have up to 6, I don't even know how many you can actually do, 6, 8 main characters. That's a bit large. And so what you want to do, and probably most of you know this from your reading, whatever books you like to read, you usually want to follow 1 or 2. More gets complicated. You certainly can do it. Anybody that's read Brandon Sanderson knows he loves just throwing new characters at you in the middle of the book. You just have new characters. So it's totally possible, but especially if you're just starting out, I highly recommend you narrow it into 1 or 2, because you're going to need to really dive into their backstory, their motivation, and obviously, probably you already know at least some of that having run the campaign, because a lot of that has to do with how they're going through your campaign. But you're going to need to delve even further to make sure that whoever you're following, those main characters, their motivation ties directly with your main conflict. You don't have it spread out over 6 characters anymore. You have a focus, somebody that the readers are following. So on that note, if you do decide, instead of going with a character that you already have that's existing, you can certainly start a new character. And so what I put in here is you either need to start from the plot, that is, decide what you're going to do. Like I said, defeat the dragon, take over the castle, if it's sci-fi, get through the Stargate, whatever you want to do. Or you can still base your plot on rolls. So if you really like rolling your characters, go for it. Go ahead and roll your characters, see what comes up. But you need to do that first and then decide what your plot is going to be. Because if you roll a character that has absolutely no charisma, is super clumsy, and is, loud and bulky, and then you have a plot that you want to do where they're supposed to be sneaking into a castle, it's not going to quite work, unless of course it's supposed to be funny. So you've got to find the little bit of a balance in between there. What point of view? So as DMs, you are most likely used to talking in second person. You're saying you're going to do this. You walk into the bar. You're doing this. You're going to need to decide whether or not you want your book in first person or third person. So I am, I will, I did, or he, she, that type of a thing. And if anybody has questions on what these terms mean, shoot it into the chat, and I'll figure out how to get back to the chat after I'm done talking, and I'll answer them. All right. Technical details. So this goes a bit further into how you're running your RPG campaign, whether it be D&D or what have you, and what might need to change for your story. Now, this is where you're going to have to bear with me, because obviously I'm more familiar with the story aspect than DMing, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of a bridge for that. So show versus tell. You are very used to telling your players what they need to know, or knowing when to tell them what they need to know. So you guys are masters at parceling out information, but with a story, you also need to know how to show that information versus telling them. There is no session 0 here. There is no, well, this is the structure and this is how this is going to work, and then you dive them into the plot. You are throwing your readers into the deep end. So instead of, again, saying, oh, you guys walk into a bar and you see this, how do you react? You need to paint the picture for your readers. Show them what the bar looks like, show them the atmosphere, show them how your character is feeling when they walk in. Maybe they're intimidated because there's some gunslingers at the bar, or maybe they're excited because they absolutely love that booze after a long day. Whatever you want to put in there, you need to be able to show that instead of telling your readers what's happening. And I think that's going to be a challenge, because you're so used to telling your players what they need to know and letting them make the decision. So be very cognizant of that. Translating proficiencies and abilities to integrated characteristics. So this goes kind of back to whether or not you want to roll your character, or whether you already have sort of a character built that you've already integrated into your story. But depending on what abilities they have, what proficiencies they have, whether it's already built or not, you need to make sure those make sense in the world that you've built. It can't just be, well, I rolled an 18, so he is super intelligent. That's not how that works. Did he go to school? Did he, was he born with just this knowledge? Is he an android? Is he data smart? How does this work? And you're going to need to give that information, give some sort of logical explanation to that, because it's not just a number on a page any longer. Same thing, add rationalization to your race and class background. So this specifically, when you go to roll a character, when you get a race or a class, they come with a background. They come with details that they're given. Those are phenomenal, and if you can use them, great, but make sure they still make sense in your story and that they're integrated into that world, that it's not just an individual background that you're plopping into a world, because it's going to feel disconnected. Adding limitations to magic and world to translate the game mechanics. So obviously you guys are well familiar with spell slots, hit points, armor class, things like that. This is to limit the power of your characters. This is to show, they can't just have magic and use it whenever they want, which makes sense because you don't want them just walking up to the dragon and being like, I got you, done, that's it, thanks. It doesn't work. In the same way, you need to have those limitations in your story, but you need to have logic behind them, whether it's knowledge they need to learn. So obviously Harry, the way that magic works, they have unlimited amount of magic. It comes from in them. They don't run dry. That's not how that works. They're limited by their knowledge. If you don't know how to do it, how do you cast the spell? So they're always constantly learning. So it helps that they're at a school. Again, that logic, how you're building in that limitation and how they're going to expand past that limitation. Or for, Brandon Sanderson, the Stormlight Archive fans out there, you're going to realize that not only did he put in a limit of knowledge, so Kaladin, has to learn his powers, and if I'm ruining this book for you, I am so sorry, but also that, he has to be near, the light, the orbs, and my brain is going absolute zero on the name of that. Anyway, he has to be near the power source as well as know the knowledge. It doesn't come from within him naturally. So it's that type of thing where you have to have those limitations. You can't just say, well, you have 6 spells and you can only use them once today. You have to make sure you have those limitations in there and that they make sense within the world that you've built. Finally, cut world building unless necessary. An RPG campaign, D&D specifically is what I'm talking about because that's what I have experience in. The just absolute detail that you have to go in is massive and phenomenal. You need, to know how their money works. You need the town details. You have backstory on all the items and all the politics. You can have all this for your book, but don't delve too deeply into it unless the reader needs to know, A, and for the scene that you're writing that moment, unless they need to know right then. There's going to be a want to give them all this information because your world is so cool, and that's great, and there are a lot of people that might be interested in all that extra information, but not at that point during the story. So they don't need to know that you gave them 5 gold and you got 4 silver back, unless they need to know how the money works for some sort of reason in the story or plot. Town details, they don't need to know where all the buildings are, because if they're not going to go there, you can just say, well, they walked into the town and headed towards the bar. Things like that, where you want to keep them focused on what you want them focused on, not on how the world works, because they're not going to be making decisions. You're making the decisions for them.
And that is how to turn your RPG campaign into a novel. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, I would love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to reach out in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next week, keep writing.